Now that summer is upon us, college football recruiting is about to heat up in a big way. So with that in mind, today I've got a list of the top 5 targets for the Georgia Bulldogs in this 2025 recruiting class. So who made the cut and why? Let's talk about it.
We just stepped on their face with a hobnail boot and broke their nose. We just crushed their face.
What's up, guys? I'm Tyler, and this is the Glory UGA podcast. If you enjoyed today's video content, make sure to check out the audio side, the Glory UGA podcast, wherever you get your podcast for more great Georgia sports content. It's just a small sample of what we've got going on for you on the audio side of things. We've been doing that podcast, the audio side, for a decade now. Hard to believe it has been a decade, but we're now just getting into the YouTube game. So if you enjoy this content, check out the Glory UGA podcast on the audio side. Also, like, subscribe, comment if you enjoy. That helps us grow this channel. And welcome. If you're a new listener, welcome. We love to have you guys here. But let's go ahead and get to this list of the top 5 recruiting targets for the Georgia Bulldogs in this 2025 recruiting class. And a couple of things before I start to reveal the list here. Putting a list together like this is hard because, number one, we don't really know all the players that Georgia is actively recruiting. We have an idea of some of the big names. We don't know all the guys. And even the names that we do know, we don't know how hard Georgia recruiting. And we don't exactly know what the recruiting board looks like. Is your offer committable? All those things. So it's a difficult task, but it's still a fun task. And we do know the bigger names. So knowing the bigger names, if I'm making a top 5 list, we can do this. We can reasonably make this happen. But that's the thing, guys. I'm limiting this to players, since there are so many players out there nationally. I'm limiting this to players that, A, we know Georgia's actively recruiting, and B, we know that they are actively considering Georgia as potentially their ultimate landing spot. And we know that based on visits and their own personal comments and interviews, those kind of things, right? So that's who we're limiting this list to. Otherwise, I have to have a criteria in some way, because otherwise I would just pull up the top 2, 4, 7 players and say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, top 5 guys, you're my top 5 list. But we're not going to do it that way, right? And I always have the question of, what am I basing this on? It's 2 things, really. It's a combination of, A, my own evaluation of these players by watching their film. If they're in the Athens area, the Metro Atlanta area, chances are I've either seen you in person or seen you on TV and seen full games, especially if your team's pretty good and they go deep in the playoffs. Get to watch those games on TV. I also have a subscription to a network that allows me to watch these games on Friday nights, so I have fun doing that. So a lot of these players I have seen, if not full games, portions of their games, not just highlight tapes. So I do base it on my evaluations, and I also base it on need. I base it on need. Like, how much does Georgia need your position right now? Like, is it a major position of need, or are we stacked at that position? It's really those 2 things, my evaluation and how much we need your position. And that's it, guys. That's really it. Rankings have nothing to do with it, believe it or not. I am not a star watcher. I'm not a stargazer. I recognize the reality that 5-star guys do typically hit at a far higher rate than like 2- and 3-star guys, but 5-star guys can miss. 2- and 3-star guys, they can be big-time players as well. And I'm the guy, not to like pat myself on the back, but just to kind of establish my bona fides, my credibility for some of you who might be newer to this podcast. You can check the tape on this. You can verify this. Go back and find it years ago. But back in 2020, I was the guy that told you, Lad McConkey, when we signed this guy late in that 2020 cycle, I told you, like, this guy can play. He was a lowly 2-star, unranked nationally. I put up the tape and I said, this guy can play, and he's the kind of guy, if we don't take him, you will regret this. Somebody in the SEC will take a flyer on him, and he'll come back, and he will hurt us at some point. So, I miss on some too. I don't bat 1,000, but a guy like Lad McConkey, just an example of, I don't stargaze. I don't care what your stars are. I make my own evaluations, and that's what I've done with this list. So, all right, that's kind of how I put this together. And let's go ahead, guys. Let's jump into this list, and we're going to start at the bottom, and we are going to work our way up the list. So we're going to go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And at the bottom here, we're going to start with inside linebacker, at least that's how we're projecting him at the college level, Zaden Walker, who's a 5-star guy, the number 1 inside linebacker in the country. And I hate that Zaden Walker is this low on this particular list, because I love the guy. I absolutely love the talent. And I'm a sucker. You guys know me. I'm a sucker for good inside linebacker play. But the reason he is at number 5 and not higher on this list, his talent would certainly warrant him being higher on the list. But the reason he's not higher is just the position that he plays. It's an important position for Georgia in our defense, but it's just not a major position of need right now, guys. Look at our inside linebacker room. Is there an inside linebacker room in the country as deep and talented and stocked with elite talent as Georgia's? I mean, guys, we have dudes that would start pretty much everywhere else in the country that are not going to see the field for us. And it's just an embarrassment of riches at inside linebacker. So as good as Zaden Walker is, it's just not a major position of need for the Georgia Bulldogs right now. And that's why he's lower on my list. He's still in the top 5. That's how highly I think of him. But he's not higher because of the lack of need, I guess. You always need good players. You want to stack your roster as much as possible. But there's not as much of a pressing need at inside linebacker as there is, I don't know, maybe defensive tackle. That's what we'll talk about here in a minute or two. But he's just so good, guys, that he has to be on my list. But he's an interesting prospect. He doesn't play inside linebacker at the high school level. He doesn't. He's really a 3-4 outside linebacker. That's what he plays. And it's like they play like a base 3-4 in Schley County, which is where he plays. They don't really do much exotic stuff. So it's base 3-4. He's really more of an edge rusher at the high school level than anything else. And so if you think about that skill set, what it takes, and he has a great edge rushing skill set, and also just his body, his build, his body type, he reminds me a lot of Jalen Walker. Now, Jalen Walker did play more inside linebacker in high school than like true inside linebacker than what we've seen from Zaden Walker. But there's similarities there that both those guys have elite pass rushing skills coming out of high school, coming to the college level. And just like Jalen Walker, I think that might give, as stacked as our room is at inside linebacker, it might give Zaden Walker a chance to get on the field early because he's just a dynamic pass rush. I mean, advanced pass rush moves, guys. I'm not talking about just like speed rush. This dude can bend, he can rip, he can do all those things. He's very technically sound and very advanced technically for a guy in high school at that position and doing those kind of things. So I think that might give him a shot to get on the field earlier than he otherwise would, kind of like we've seen with Jalen Walker through his first 2 years here in Athens, although I think we'll see a lot more of him actually inside linebacker this year. But although he has been primarily an edge rusher, he does project, like body type-wise, like Jalen Walker, he projects physically as an inside linebacker to the next level. There will be some growing pains. Quay Walker's another example. Quay Walker played on the edge the majority of his high school career. It took him a while to figure out how to play inside linebacker. And once he did, though, when the light went on, and this guy, first-round draft pick, right? And the rest is history. So that very well could happen with Zaden Walker. I don't expect him to be a stud at inside linebacker right away because he's got to learn how to do it, but he can pass rush, man. He's got that skill set a lot like Jalen Walker. And he's just a dynamic athlete, man. Like, if you watch this guy out there on tape, watch him play, the dude's flying around. Like, he's shot out of a cannon type stuff. And he's a dynamic athlete, bends really well. Again, he has an array of pass rush moves, just a crazy, crazy level athlete. He is a 5-star prospect, number 1 inside linebacker for a reason, guys. He is legit. So he's coming at number 5 on my list of the top 5 most wanted prospects in this 2025 recruiting class for the Georgia Bulldogs. Moving up a spot, let's go to number 4. Travis Smith Jr., wide receiver from Westlake High School here in the great state of Georgia, 6'4", about 195. Now, you're going to see Smith is not like the other guys on this list. I think every other player on this list is a 5-star guy. Again, not star watching, but just my evaluation. Sometimes it aligns. Oftentimes it does. But Travis Smith is not a 5-star. Now, he's not a lowly rated guy. He is a highly rated 4-star. He's number 118 nationally, number 14 wide receiver in the country. But this is about need. Okay, it's been well documented. We all know the issues Georgia has had in recent years recruiting high-level, elite receiving prospects. There's a lot of negative recruiting out there about how we use receivers. We use tight ends more. We run the ball a lot. They're not going to feature you, yada, yada, yada. We hear all that. So it's been an uphill battle for us to land these top guys at receiver. We've been in the conversation because we are a great program, but landing them, we haven't really landed all that many of them outside maybe George Pickens a couple years back. So this is a major position of need. And we have to understand that. We have to acknowledge that. And that's why he is on this list. Are there other guys that we are recruiting that might be more physically gifted than Travis Smith Jr.? Yeah, potentially, although he's very gifted himself. But this is a major position of need, and that's a big part of how I'm putting together this list. And look, I love our wide receiver room this year. I think we're going to be really good at receiver this year. But we need to also plan for the future. That's what you do with recruiting. And I like the guys that we brought in last year in Sokovia White and Nitro Tuggle, but we only brought in 2 guys out of high school, man. Only 2. We've got to restock the coffers, and we want to bring in big-time players. And if you're asking me right now, of the guys that we know Georgia's actively recruiting at the receiver position, and they're actively considering Georgia, I can't just say, oh, number one wide receiver, yeah, put him on my list, because we're not recruiting that guy. Like, we're not really a big player in the picture there. But with Travis Smith, we know that we're recruiting him, and we know that he's highly interested in Georgia. He's visited a ton of times. And so of all those guys, the receiver that we know we're really after very, very hard, this is the guy I like the most. I really love what he brings to the table. He's a great athlete. He has the speed to get on top of the defense, as you're going to see with the tape. He's got awesome length, which he uses to great effect in contested catch situations. He's a really, really good 50-50 contested catch guy, and that's also one of the things that makes him a great red zone threat. He's got great length, right? So great length, great size, the ability to make the contested catch makes him a big-time red zone threat. He's also a really fluid athlete, and I love that in receivers. So that allows you to be more adept at route running and create separation with your route running skills. And I think when you watch this guy, I think he's a pretty advanced technician as a receiver at this stage in his development, and it makes sense because he is I don't want to say protege, a pupil of former Georgia receiver Terrence Edwards, who's been training receivers for a long time now. You can go back, like Jermaine Burton was a Terrence Edwards product. So that's why you see him maybe a little bit more advanced technically than you would some other receivers coming out of high school. I also really like C.J. Wiley. C.J. Wiley is a guy that I am very high on. And every time I watch him, I get more and more excited about this guy. And I do think we have a really good shot at him. But I just need to see a little bit more of him. Honestly, I just haven't seen as much of him. I've seen a lot more of Travis Smith Jr. I've been on him a lot longer. So I'm still going to stick with Travis Smith Jr. I think both guys are really, really good. But Travis Smith is coming in at number 4 on my list of the top 5 prospects, the top targets for Georgia in this 2025 recruiting class. All right, let's move inside the top 3. Now, here's where we're going to get to some of the big guys. All right, now these are the big hitters. Now, this guy might be a little controversial. You might think, well, how is he not higher on your list? Well, coming in at number 3, I have offensive tackle David Sanders, who is 6'6", 275. We talked about him earlier in the week with the scavenger hunt weekend recap that we had. He's a Charlotte kid out of North Carolina. And he is the number 2 player overall in the entire country, the number 1 offensive tackle, really consensus number 1 offensive tackle. So you would think, like, wouldn't he be number 1 on your list, Tyler? Like number 2 overall, number 1 offensive tackle. That's a big part of what Georgia does, is we're dominant on the offensive line. Yes, I agree with that. It's a big part of why he's on this list. But look, guys, offensive line right now is just not as big of a position of need as the first 2 guys we're going to talk about, like the position they play. We need offensive linemen. We want elite guys there, but we just put together a fantastic offensive line recruiting class last year. We have Monroe Freeling in the coffers right now. We have Merriweather, who the coaches are really high on. We have a lot of guys, a lot of young guys who haven't played a lot, but are going to be very good for us. Have a great crop of guys that we brought in last year, led by Daniel Calhoun, was making waves as a true freshman in spring practice as an early enrollee. So we always need good linemen, but it's not as much of a need as, again, maybe defensive tackle, as we're going to talk about here in just a minute. But still, he's on my list, a lot like Zaden Walker, because he's just that good. Like, he's just that good. He was just here for an unofficial visit over the weekend. Will be back for his official visit in 2.5 weeks from now. Has visited Georgia a lot. We're in the top 3 with Clemson and Tennessee there as well. So he fits the criteria. We're recruiting him very hard. He is very interested in us. Will we land him? I don't know. But until he commits somewhere else, he's staying on this list. And I love this guy, man. I mean, I truly believe he's a can't-miss guy. He's incredibly athletic. He plays with outstanding leverage for a young offensive lineman. Most guys are this young and not just physically dominant. They just lean on that. They don't have to play with great technique because they're just so much bigger and stronger than everyone they play against. They just lean on these guys. He doesn't do that. He actually plays with good technique, really good hand placement, plays with really good leverage. He is an explosive athlete. How often do you say that about offensive linemen? But it's true, guys. It applies to David Sanders. He is an explosive athlete at the tackle position. He's a true left tackle, very flexible, great ankle flexibility, really fluid for an offensive lineman. And talk about physicality, he will finish blocks with authority. I said it earlier in the week, guys. His junior highlight tape, 15 plus minutes long. 15 plus minutes long for an offensive lineman. And I can't say it's every play of his junior year. It's not. But 15 minutes is a lot of plays, and they are all just like, wow, eye-opening type plays. The athleticism is on full display, getting out there in the screen game, getting out there and blocking for the receivers, the running backs, pulling. The athleticism is just, it's so obvious. Like, how could, even like the novice football fan can look at that guy and say, yeah, he's really, really good. It's that obvious, man. So to me, I think he's a can't-miss offensive tackle prospect. I think he's a future first-round guy. I think he's a future top 10 guy. I hate to label somebody a can't-miss prospect because invariably the can't-miss prospects, some way, somehow they miss. But barring injury, man, I just don't see how this guy is not going to be a future first-round draft pick. So David Sanders definitely has to be on my list. He would be higher. He just happens to play a position that's not in as great of need for Georgia right now as the next position is, which is defensive tackle. Guys, defensive tackle, in my estimation, is the biggest position of need on the entire roster right now. We have good defensive tackles. We've recruited well there, but we don't have any proven difference makers right now. Can Jordan Hall grow into that this year? Absolutely he could. Could Christian Miller grow into that this year? Yeah, if he takes some steps forward. Could Jamal Jarrett down the line grow into that? Yes. Namdia Boko, yes, it could, but we don't know that right now. All I know is that we did not win the national championship last year. And in my estimation, the biggest reason for that was we just simply were not as good against the run as we had been in recent years, winning those back-to-back national titles. Use the Alabama game, the SEC championship game for evidence. When we were making that comeback late in the fourth quarter, if we get one more stop, we got a shot, get the momentum, we can go win that football game. We couldn't get the stop. And Bama wasn't throwing the ball. They were just running the ball right at us. 2021 Georgia, 2022 Georgia gets that stop. 2023 Georgia did not, because we did not have the difference makers on the defensive line. Good players, really good players. Difference makers though? No. Jordan Davis caliber players? No. Jalen Walker caliber players? No. Or Jalen Carter caliber players? No. We didn't have guys like that. So if we want to get back to winning national titles and being dominant defensively and being better against the run, because last year we just weren't, guys. We were not good enough against the run. We gave up almost 4 yards per rush last year. That's ridiculous for a Georgia defense. That is unacceptable. That cannot happen if you want to win national championships. So we've got to get back to dominant defensive play. And the fastest way to do that is to get back to recruiting dominant defensive linemen that are just game changers. And there's two guys, the top of my list, that are both defensive tackles that I think are game-changing type defensive linemen. They're difference makers. So at number 2, and it was really hard for me, guys, to differentiate between these two dudes. But coming in number 2 is defensive tackle Elijah Griffin out of Savannah Christian down south here in Georgia. 6'5", 285 is what he's listed at. He's the number 7 overall prospect in the country, the number 1 defensive tackle prospect in the country. So you're like, wait a minute, wait, Tyler. You just said that defensive tackle is the biggest position on the team in this recruiting class. Here's the number 1 defensive tackle in the country, and he's not number 1 on your list. Well, let's go back to what I said at the outset, guys. I don't base this exclusively on rankings, okay? I really at all. I don't pay attention to that. In fact, when I made this list, I didn't know at the time that he was number 1 on 247 with the 247 composite. I knew he was highly rated. I knew he was a 5-star. I didn't know he was number 1. But based on my evaluation, watching him play, I got him at number 2. We'll talk about number 1 here in a minute. Let me just explain this. Like, the biggest reason he's number 2, not number 1, really I had to differentiate between these two guys some way, somehow, and they're very similar. I like them both a great deal. But Griffin does not have any junior tape that I could find anywhere. The only tape I could find was sophomore tape. So I don't have as clear of a picture of what he looks like right now as I do the guy that's number 1 on my list, which we'll get to here in just a minute. His sophomore tape, it's like wow type stuff. It's amazing stuff. It blows your mind. But again, it's not the most recent tape. So how much has he grown? How much has he developed? I don't know. The guy that's number 1 on the list, I have his junior tape, and I can see what he looks like more so right now than he did back when he was, maybe 15, 16 years old. So that's why he's a number 2. That's the only reason. It's really 1A and 1B with these top 2 guys, to be quite frank with you guys. But, he's a dynamic athlete on the interior of the defensive line. He is so crazy explosive. He's incredibly twitchy as well for an interior guy. He reminds me a lot of former Clemson defensive lineman, I think now Miami Dolphins defensive lineman, Christian Wilkins. I think that's the best comp for him. Like, when I watch him play, that's the first thing that came to mind. It's like, this is Christian Wilkins. Just the way he moves, the athleticism, the explosiveness, the twitchiness there as an interior guy. He also has a lot of positional versatility. He plays 5-tech, basically defensive end. When his team, Savannah Christian, is playing even fronts, he'll slide down and play some 3-tech when they're playing odd fronts. They seem on tape to play more even fronts, but he projects more as a 3-tech guy at the college level. But I do think with the athleticism, he has the ability to play 5-tech at times if you want to play some even front. So I love that positional versatility. As a guy who does play on the edge sometimes and basically a 4-man front, he has pretty advanced pass rush skills. And he, again, is a dynamic athlete. If he really wanted to, could he play defensive end? Maybe even in a 4-3? Yeah, maybe. I don't know if he's 4-3 defensive end level athletic, but for a guy that's going to be 290, 300 pounds when he gets to college, crazy athletic. And he has awesome pass rush skills, guys. I like Zaden Walker. This dude that bends incredibly well, really flexible, has a great rip move that he likes to use a lot. I love what he can bring from a pass rush standpoint, really advanced there. But yeah, man, he's just straight up a difference maker. He is a difference maker on the defensive line. That's what we need, guys. That is the missing ingredient. Now, again, maybe the guys who have on the roster right now can grow into that. Maybe a guy like Christian Miller and Jordan Hall, they can grow into that this year. I'm very hopeful, but we don't know that right now. We need difference makers, and I feel very confident saying Elijah Griffin would 100% be a difference maker for Georgia on the defensive line. All right, and the number one, the other defensive lineman here, it's a weird one. You might be kind of curious why I would have him at number one, because he is currently committed elsewhere, but he's also very open about the fact that his recruitment is still very open, even though he is committed elsewhere. And that is defensive tackle Justice Terry out of Manchester High School here in Georgia. 6'5", about 280 pounds, the number 8 overall prospect in the country, number 2 defensive lineman. There is a reason why he is number 1 on my list. The guy is a straight-up freak. Now, again, the differentiating factor between him and Griffin right now is just I've just seen more recent tape of his. I've got his junior tape. That's really what it comes down to. I had to differentiate between them some way, somehow, and that's really what was a deciding factor. Now, this is a guy, I know he's committed elsewhere. He's committed to USC right now, but he was committed to Georgia for over a year. So it was, January of 2022? He committed, or 2023, I guess, he committed to Georgia. He decommitted in March of this year, in 2024, so a couple months ago. But we are still actively recruiting him. He was here for the G-Day scrimmage, and he spoke glowingly of Georgia. He was very open. Hey, NIL was like the primary factor here. I went out to LA. They offered me a bunch of money. I'm a kid from a small town in Georgia. My eyes opened real wide when I saw LA, and he wants to be a barber. He wants to cut hair. And you can read all this on Dog Nation. They had a great profile on him. He wants to cut hair, and they told him, hey, man, there's a lot of business opportunities out here in LA. So kid from small town Georgia says, man, yeah, let's go to USC. But it's really about NIL, and he basically said as much in that article. And so he straight up said, I'm waiting to hear Georgia's NIL offer. Apparently, we haven't made him his offer yet, and so he wants to see what that offer is going to be. So there's a very good chance that we could get this guy back. We could flip him back from USC, which we could do with Michael Williams. So we'll see how it goes, but he's still definitely listening to Georgia. We are definitely a major player in his recruitment, even though he is committed elsewhere. But again, guys, the defensive line, in my estimation, I've said this many times throughout this offseason, the lack of difference makers on the defensive line last year is the biggest reason why we did not win a national championship. That's my opinion. You might disagree. Some of you I know will say my Bobo. Now, we don't even want to go down that rabbit hole. That's another story for another day. But I think it was our run defense. And why was our run defense not as good last year? Our defensive line simply wasn't as dominant as it had been those past 2 years that we won back-to-back national titles. That was really it. That's what it came down to. So we need difference makers. And Justice Terry is a difference maker, guys. Big time dude. Not all 5 stars hit. Not all 5 stars deserve to be 5 stars. This guy qualifies as a 5-star. And all the same things I really said about Elijah Griffin. Again, there's not much of a gap between these guys. They're all true of Justice Terry. You can say the same things. He is so crazy explosive. He's physically dominant. I would say on tape he's more physically dominant than Elijah Griffin. But again, Elijah Griffin, I'm watching his sophomore tape. He's just not as built, he's just not as grown up as you would be a year. Like your sophomore to junior year, you grow a lot. You get a lot stronger. And so when you're watching Justice Terry's junior tape, you're like, whoa, this guy's, he's just a physical freak. And Elijah Griffin's really strong too, big guy, but as a sophomore, he's not as big as Justice Terry was as a junior, which is the tape we have to watch there. So physically dominant, has an incredible frame, a lot like Elijah Griffin, has great pass rush ability, dynamic athlete, also has that positional versatility, can play on the edge as a 5-tech guy. He has that kind of athleticism, but obviously I think he projects much more so as a 3-tech guy. And I'll say this about Justice Terry. So when I first watched his tape back when he committed, January of 2023, and was a sophomore tape at that time, and then I watched his junior tape before he decommitted. He's the first guy as a defensive tackle that I have watched. And the first time I watched their tape, I'm like, I had the same exact feelings about this guy as I had about Jalen Carter the first time I saw his tape out of Apopka High School in Florida. I remember the first time I saw Jalen Carter's high school tape. He was not a highly rated guy at first. He really kind of blew up in the rankings later on that cycle when he came out. He didn't really play defensive tackle until his senior year, not full time. Played a little bit, but he's more of like an offensive guy. But they realized his potential when he was being recruited as. So as a senior, he played almost exclusively defensive tackle. But when I saw even like his junior tape, the little bit of defensive tackle he played, I was like, we got to get this guy. I don't care if he's not a 5-star. I don't care. We've got to get this guy. And lo and behold, eventually becomes a 5-star guy and becomes Jalen Carter, the first-round draft pick that we all know and love. I love Jordan Hall's tape. I like Jamal Jarrett's tape. All these guys, I like their tape. I didn't feel the same way about them that I felt about Jalen Carter coming out. But when I saw Justice Terry's tape for the first time, I'm like, this is it. This is Jalen. This is the closest I've seen to Jalen Carter on tape coming out of high school that Georgia's been recruiting since Jalen Carter. That's how highly I think of him. So when I say difference maker, that's what I mean. And I can say the same things about Elijah Griffin. When I watch his tape, you're like, this athleticism at that position, that size is off the charts, both these guys. And considering the position of need, along with how elite these guys are from a talent standpoint, that's why those two guys are at the top of my list. Version 1, volume 1.0 of the 2025 top 5 most wanted recruits for the Georgia Bulldogs. But all right, guys, that's all I got for you here today. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you like this video, again, make sure to check out the Glory UGA podcast, the audio side, wherever you get your podcast for more great Georgia sports content. Like, subscribe, comment. Love to hear from you guys. But thanks for being here, guys. Have a great weekend. And as always, go Dogs.
Man, is there going to be some property destroyed tonight. 26-21. Dogs on top.